begin.
Welcome to another edition, a very special edition of the WiseTake DFS podcast, sponsored by DRS, our friends over at Daily Roto Sharks. That's dailyrotosharks.com. We've had them on the pod recently. You will be seeing a lot of them this MLB season. So do me a favor, do all of us a favor. Go over to DRS, check them out, and show some love on behalf of the WiseTake podcast. Anyway, guys, it's interesting. Right now, it's actually Thursday, March 30th, and we have a very big weekend coming up. We got MLB season starting. As you can see, we got a new layout. We're excited for MLB. We've got one more NBA podcast that's going to be released Thursday night for Friday's games, and that's it. We're full-time MLB. With that said, we have a very, very special guest. I've teased him a little bit to you guys in the past, but I don't want to give him away just yet. But we got Matt Amon. You can find him on Twitter at MattAmon123. Of course, you can always find me on Twitter at CK_013. And Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing great. CK. How are you? Go ahead.
No. I'm doing awesome. I know you're doing well. For those of you that maybe didn't notice what hat he's wearing, that's the Oregon Ducks hat. Matt is an Oregon alum, and you know he's excited. His team's in the Final Four, right, Matt?
Oh, I'm really excited. We're going to Phoenix on Saturday to watch the game, and I can't wait.
That's phenomenal. That's awesome. And look, regardless win or lose, whether Oregon wins or lose, you know it's going to be a great time because when Matt comes back, he's got baseball to look forward to, right?
Yeah, that's true. I've been waiting for baseball for a long time. I've been getting tired of basketball, tired of figuring out, who's going to play and who's going to sit, and every day being like, hey, I wonder who the Kings are going to play today.
Absolutely. Now, they always say baseball is a grind, and NBA is a grind. MLB is a grind too, but the NBA is like a much different kind of grind. It's like, like you mentioned, like for instance, in the MLB, at least they regulate the lineups for the most part. Like the coaches have to get a lineup in. Sure, once in a while you'll have a late scratch. Sure, you have to worry about weather from time to time. But in the NBA, the lineups are literally never regulated. So if a team doesn't have a solid beat writer or they have a coach who wants to keep things private for whatever reason, you're kind of left hanging. And anyway, we're going to talk about some baseball real quick. I want to give Matt his proper introduction. I want you guys to understand why we brought him on and how he can kind of help you. So Matt, last year, first of all, Matt's a former poker player, and we're going to have him talk about that a little bit. More importantly, as far as how it relates to DFS, last year, now Matt's a tournament guy. He won over $30K on DraftKings MLB. Is that right, Matt?
That sounds about right.
And you did it with not just one big win. You had a few. What was it, like 3 to 5 different tournament wins?
Yeah, I had 3 tournaments where I had 5-figure scores. I think I had one first place, and then I had like a second and a third in, whatever the big $4 tournament is called. I think they were calling it the Slurve maybe at the end of the year on DraftKings.
That's awesome, man. That's extremely cool. And that was one of the things that one of the reasons we went after Matt and tried to bring him on the pod. And Matt's going to be here regularly. He's also going to be writing baseball articles for our sponsors, Daily Roto Sharks. So pay attention. You're going to want to follow the Twitter. You're going to want to follow Matt on Twitter. And you're going to want to follow, obviously, Daily Roto Sharks on Twitter to make this way you catch all those articles because you're going to want to hear what this guy has to say. And now, Matt, you're a tournament player. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Why don't you do me a favor? I know you're a former professional poker player. Tell me a little bit about your past. Tell me a little bit about how you did in the poker world, some of the accolades, and then I want you to tell me how you kind of transitioned and got into DFS.
Yeah, so the year I graduated college, or actually kind of in college, I started playing poker online, and I did that for about 10 years, and for a long time, it was really great. I played cash games a lot, and it was very consistent. I made a decent amount of money, and it was great. And then, as probably most of the audience knows, it became much tougher over the years. The government got involved, shut down all the sites. Poker Stars had their issues and all the other sites. And it just became much more difficult to make money playing poker. And also everyone got a lot better at poker. So not only did you have, the sites having problems, you had everybody getting better at the same time. So a few years ago, I was playing at the World Series of Poker in Vegas, Rio. And they had a DraftKings lounge set up there. So during the breaks, I would go in there and I would have snacks and watch TV and lay on the couch. And one day I picked up a book, and it was a fantasy book, and it was this I don't know if you can see that. The Fantasy Baseball for Smart People by Jonathan Bales, who's over at what's the site? Fantasy Labs, which is
Right.
really awesome.
Shout out to Fantasy Labs. Those guys get a lot of love on this pod. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, hey, they're really good and really smart guys. But
Agreed.
anyways, I read the book and I said, hey, maybe this is something I can get into. And I love sports and I love to gamble and all that stuff. And so I tried it and I really, really liked it. And I thought I was good at it and I was making money. And I kind of felt like the way that I was approaching it was profitable. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. So I've kind of been transitioning back and forth between daily fantasy and poker. During baseball season, I've been playing DFS, and then, I play football, but it's only once a week, so I kind of play poker again, in the off season of baseball.
Awesome. Now, Matt, do me a favor. Now, this is a question I always ask whenever I come across somebody in the DFS industry who is either currently or formerly a professional poker player. I often ask, because there's obviously a huge amount of poker players who crossed into the DFS world, and a lot of them who still do both like yourself. So I wanted to ask, what do you think the direct correlation? And there's no wrong answer here. It's all opinion. I don't think there's a proven fact of what it is exactly. Everybody's different, of course. What is it that you think draws so many poker players to the world of DFS?
Well, one, it's gambling. I mean, don't show that to the people that are trying to legislate stuff. But gambling like poker, and it's competition, and it's a game, and we all like games, and we all like to try to win money, and it's it's a game where you're playing against other people. You're not playing against the house. So if you work hard at it, you can win money. And it's obviously way better than 9 to 5.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And that makes perfect sense to me, and especially when we consider everything that makes a good poker player, right? Like, what makes a good poker player? You got to have strategy. You got to be aggressive. Like you said, gambling. You have to like to gamble. You got to be comfortable taking risks, and also, which I think really helps guys like yourself, these tournament players, is you got to be able to read the field, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Matt, let me ask you a question. Now, I know that your methods aren't necessarily the traditional DFS mathematical statistical methods. Like, we hear all the time about WOBA, lefty-righty splits, XFIP, FIP, all these different kind of advanced statistics from sabermetrics. And I myself am somebody, I spend hours a day in the baseball season doing my own research and it's part of the reasons I decided to do a podcast in the first place is I'm doing the research anyway. Now, your approach is a little bit different. Why don't you tell everybody what your approach is typically?
Well, basically, I try to listen to all the people that are smarter than me talk about those statistics. And then I just try to think about them, and then I just try to follow the strategy that, I think is a winning strategy, which is basically always stacking. So, I mean, I'm sure most of the audience knows what stacking is. You play a lot of the same players from the same team, 4 from the same team, 5 from the same team. When I first started out, you could do up to 6, and now they limited it to 5. But I pretty much do that, and then I get my 5 or 6 pitchers and then just rotate them around.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's almost like a pinwheel type strategy. Like maybe you have a set stack of, maybe you have 2 teams and you have a set stack of players, and then you kind of rotate the pitchers in and out. And maybe I'm sure 1 or 2 players have to switch because of the pricing differences. But is that kind of your method?
Yeah,
there?
that's basically it. So I go through during the day, and I kind of during breakfast, I'll look at the slate and kind of see, I think I might want to attack that pitcher, or the weather's really good in this stadium, so that might be a spot I want to go. And then I have a few podcasts I listen to during the day, and I start kind of gathering information. Then I'll go home and I'll go through game by game, and I'll see, which teams are attractive to me. I'll look through the Vegas lines. I will, do all my sort of research, and then I make a list. Which pitchers do I want to use? Which teams do I want to stack? And then I'll go through and see, which teams I think are going to be popular, and then I might toss a few of those out. So if hey, the Red Sox are going to be the most popular today, the Blue Jays are going to be the most popular today, I might just toss those out. And then I maybe pick the next 4 or 5 of my favorite teams, and then I stack those teams up maybe 10 or 15 different ways.
That's interesting. So let me ask you a question. So now when you're trying to determine what you think as we would say in the DFS industry, what the chalk would be, right? Like, which factors weigh the heaviest? Is it the Vegas totals? Is it the pitching matchup? Is it the ballpark? Which one of those factors do you think really like? Would you look at, okay, they're playing in, the Phillies are home and it's a bandbox over there, so I know the Phillies are going to be chalk. Like, is it more like which one of those factors do you weight heavier?
Combination of those factors.
Okay.
Right. So it's, the Red Sox are facing Jared Weaver at home and they're, projected to score 7 runs. And also I'm kind of listening throughout the day. I'm following all the people on Twitter, Jared Weaver's going to get crushed tonight. Or, I'm over on Roto Grinders watching Grinders Live, and every single analyst that's coming on is saying, the Red Sox are going to be chalk today. So I trust all those people to say, hey, that's what's going on. And also when you play every day, you kind of get a sense for where the crowd is going to be.
True.
So, if the Red Sox are projected to score 7 and maybe the Blue Jays are projected to score 6.5, and both of those teams are in really good spots. And I know, those kind of stacks are going to be 30%, 25% owned. Then maybe I'll go to, the Diamondbacks, who are in an equally good spot, but are less popular because they don't have as many, they're not as good of an offense normally. So I'll go to Arizona and I'll stack them up because they're in a good stadium and they're in a good spot and they're going to be less popular. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, the Red Sox are projected to score 6, the are 7, and the Blue Jays are projected to score 6, and the Rockies are projected to score 5.5. So they're in almost as good of a spot, and you're going to get them at 5 to 10% ownership versus the Red Sox at 30%.
That's very interesting, and that brings me to my next question. What do you typically do when you got a game going on at Coors Field? We already know that any game at Coors Field is going to be chalk. Yep. And so how does someone like you, a tournament player who makes it a point, who pretty much your whole lineup construction is based off fading the chalk, how do you handle those games?
Well, sometimes I stack it up and sometimes I don't, just depending on, it's kind of like in the NBA, it's kind of like, can you fade Westbrook and Harden today? It's kind of like that sort of thing. It's like, everyone's so priced up at Coors, can you make it work?
Right.
Is there a pitcher at 6K that you feel comfortable with? Or some days there's just not. Or, is the matchup good at Coors? Do you like the visiting lineup? Is there value in those lineups, or is it just impossible to make it work? Mm. So it's kind of all those factors. Or, some days Coors won't be chalk. If Max Scherzer's pitching in Coors, maybe the Rockies aren't chalk that day. So, hey, maybe that might be a day you might want to go to Coors because, as we've seen, anyone can get blown up in Coors. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I stacked up Coors many times. And I would be lying if I said, I fade Coors every day. That is not true, for sure. I played Coors many times. One of my big scores last year was the Diamondbacks at Coors Field. So, hey, but you got to learn, which parks are close to Coors that you can pivot to, like Arizona or Toronto or, Yankee Stadium for left-handers and Cincinnati, Milwaukee, all those stadiums are really good hitting parks. I mean, nothing like Colorado, but, that's kind of priced in.
Absolutely. No,
it makes perfect sense. You know what?
I think I'm coming loud on the speakers. I can hear myself. And, just turn me down a little bit.
I just turned it down.
That happened to me last night with Fuego, too. I kept scaring myself. I was like, is somebody in the room with you?
Yeah.
I was like, it sounds just like me. No, but anyway, it's no problem. And anyway, so, one thing that I will say that I think is important we address. Now, I don't know if people know this. I would assume most if you're experienced in MLB DFS, then they probably already know. But one of the best things, I think one of the most important things, like we always talk about being contrarian in these tournaments, right? We always talk about differentiating our lineups, finding low-owned guys. I don't think there is a sport. Well, I'm talking about the big three. I'm talking about baseball, NFL, and basketball. There is not a sport where I think being contrarian matters more than baseball, and I think that's because it has the highest variance, right? Like you could have Jose Bautista against the worst lefty on the planet. He could still go 0 for 4 if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed, right?
Yep, absolutely he can. Absolutely. So, there's big advantages to being contrarian in baseball for sure. And, also we've seen any pitcher can get blown up too. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and advocate for stacking against Clayton Kershaw, ever. But, there's certainly a lot of in between. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, and that's the thing. You're right. Even on the pitching side, there's typically less variance, but there is still variance. Like you said, we've seen Clayton Kershaw. It's very rare, but we've seen him get blown up. We've seen Max Scherzer go out there and just completely get bombed. Like you're absolutely right. So I definitely think that makes a lot of sense. Now, why don't you tell me when you're looking for these particular stacks, like let's say there's a game you just can't get away from. Let's say a guy like Mike Pelfrey is going up against, say, the Toronto Blue Jays, right? Like we all know, we all love to target Pelf. Now, what do you think? Like, are there situations where maybe you don't feel comfortable fading a team completely? So what do? Do you stack the bottom of their lineup, or do you just try to find guys that aren't going to be popular from that lineup?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, several of my good days yesterday were stacking up the bottom of the lineups, and most of the time when you see the ownership percentages, all the ownership's going to be on the top of the order. You know what I mean? It's going to be on, if you take the Red Sox, for instance, I had a good day stacking the Red Sox last year, and everyone's going to stack Pedroia and Bogarts and Big Papi and Mookie Betts, etc. But the day I did good last year, I had Hanley and Chris Young and Sandy Leone and Jackie Bradley. So you have the bottom of the order who's in equally as good of a spot, but they're going to be lower owned, one, and two, they're cheaper, which allows you to, pay up at pitcher, which helps a lot.
That's very interesting. Now, here's a question for you. Now, for me in the NBA, I always say that like 6 to 8 games is like my bread and butter. Like I like those kind of slates because I like to have options. In the MLB, what would you say is your ideal slate size?
I mean, I like 10 to 12 games, so you don't have to research the normal 15 games, but it's not like 4 or 5 games where you don't have that many options. And also me as a stacker, I predominantly just do 5-man stacks all the time. When you start getting into the 4 or 5 game territory, it becomes less effective. The 3-3-2 might be better, or, whatever. But when you get into the bigger slates, the 5-man stacks, is the way to go.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm with you. I typically like I do play cash games, and the only reason I play cash, to be honest, is to help me sustain my tournament losses. Obviously, tournaments are fun. They're more enjoyable. It's boring to play guys that are just in phenomenal spots that everybody's going to be on. It's fun to find guys that nobody else is cheering for and picking that guy. Right. We all love the underdogs, right? So I'm with you. So on these tournaments, now on DraftKings, you can put 5 players in a lineup. FanDuel, you can only put 4. How heavy do you go? Like say like you said, say there's a 12-game slate or a 10 to 12 games. Will you typically fall in love with one particular team, or do you try to get as much of a variation of different teams as possible?
Well, I've debated this a lot, over the last year. Do you want to stack up 3 or 4 teams, or at points last year I was doing like 10. And, I might do 100 entries in a day, and I might do 10 entries of 10 different teams. And I say, is it better to do that? Or is it better to take 3 teams and stack them 50 different ways? So if that team goes off, you're going to be just all over it. I've kind of gone back and forth, and obviously stacking up 3 teams is much higher variance.
Right.
Because most days you're going to get crushed because you're going to be wrong.
Right.
But the days that you're right, you're going to win a lot. So I think it's kind of to everybody, to your preference. Can you withstand losing every day for 8, 9, 10 days in a row, and then on the 10th day getting a big payoff?
Yeah, I think that I get it. I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's gonna go. I guess really, if you could figure out which teams were gonna perform every single night, which stacks to use, then you wouldn't be playing fantasy. You would just be betting on the games because you know who's gonna win. Apparently, right?
Right.
So that's part of what makes fantasy so fun, is that it's, as a lot of people say, and I agree with them, fantasy, I think what attracts us all to fantasy, it's like a puzzle, right? Like at the end of the night, there's really one right answer. That right answer is going to get you at the top. And you have millions of pieces, and you're just trying to piece them all together, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's like when you're right and you stack it up a million different ways, you're going to get paid off.
Right.
But at the beginning of the year, last year, when I was doing more teams, I would have more winning days. And I actually, sometimes you will break through, and one of the 10 you do will be good enough.
True.
So I kind of go back and forth on that. I think, going into this season, I'm going to stick with less teams, and more variations of that stack and maybe start at a smaller buy-in level, so my bankroll can withstand, the ups and downs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it sounds to me like you have a pretty good hand on. You seem to have a pretty good idea of what you're trying to do. I mean, not even on a slate to slate basis, but entering the MLB season, you already seem to have an outline. And you just said maybe I'm going to limit my teams, but go on lower entry tournaments and things like that. So I definitely think you're onto something here, and I can see that you certainly take it very serious. Which I think, hey, if there's money behind it, why wouldn't you take it serious, right?
Yeah, well,
no, go ahead.
Well, hey, there's guys out there putting in a lot of hours. If you want to compete with these guys, you got to be working hard and you got to have a plan if you want to compete. I mean, there's a lot of really good players that are much smarter than me that are, in these tournaments. You gotta work hard and you gotta have a plan. Yeah,
no, you're 100% right. Now, let's take a quick look. I just want to kind of apply some of the things we've talked about. If you don't mind, I know you typically play on DraftKings, but we don't have a Sunday opening day slate for them. So if you could pull up FanDuel for me, right? Let's go through this, and we're not going to, listen, it's your first impression. You haven't looked at these at all. Just so you guys know, Matt doesn't typically play FanDuel. He's a DraftKings guy, and DraftKings doesn't have a slate. So he really has not looked at any of this stuff. This is going to be his first impression, but I just kind of want him to show us how he applies his mentality. It's only 3 games, so we know he's out of his comfort zone already. It's on FanDuel, so we know he's out of his comfort zone again. But just look at it and kind of explain to us, what pops out to you when you look at this?
Well, right away, I like the game in Arizona. Okay, I like the Giants. If I'm going to stack up, first thing I'm going to see that I like the Giants because they're getting a massive park upgrade, from what they normally play in, and they're getting Zach Greinke, who used to be awesome but hasn't been as awesome. Mm-hmm. And Arizona's bullpen has been bad. I haven't researched to see if it's still bad, but that would be my first thing that I would do. I would say, hey, I'm going to stack up the Giants and I'm going to go from there, and I'm going to see if that kind of fits.
I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, even sticking to what we know, you're right. Ever since Greinke went to Arizona, he just hasn't been the same Greinke. He's been like a shell of himself, and I think a lot of that does have to do, like what you said. Arizona, it's a very hitter-friendly ballpark with a high altitude. They're up in the mountains. It's not quite as heavy as Coors, but it's still up there. I mean, a buddy of mine lives in Phoenix. I was just down there. He took me on a hiking trip, dude, in the mountains. And that's something I've done. Like I'm from New Jersey, so I've done that millions of times, no problem. It killed me, man. By the time I got up that mountain, I could not breathe. It was just So absolutely, Arizona got some serious elevation, and it's dry, right? That's another thing. Whenever the weather's super hot and there's no humidity, there's no friction to stop that ball from traveling, right?
Right, and every day, I'm as part of my research, I'm looking into the weather, and weather is it is a big deal. Mm-hmm. I almost never ever stack teams in San Francisco or Oakland, for that reason. The air's heavy and, it's a tough ballpark to hit home runs.
Right.
So whenever I see a team like the Giants go into an upgrade ballpark, I'm always very interested because their prices reflect playing in a bad ballpark for hitting. Mm-hmm. So I'm always excited to play the Giants.
Yeah, again, that makes perfect sense. Now, so I see your first initial impression of this is you already have an idea. You're going to stack the Giants players. Now,
right.
What about on the pitching side? Is there anything about these pitchers that maybe stands out to you? For instance, we know that Arizona is typically – we have to update the stats. We haven't really looked into the offseason transactions just yet. We got to make sure the lineups still match up. But in the past, Arizona has been a high strikeout team. And obviously Mad Bum is a high strikeout pitcher. So any of these stand out to you in the beginning?
Yeah, you always love Mad Bum, but right off the bat, Chris Archer kind of stands out to me because he's a very talented pitcher, first of all, and he strikes guys out. And Tampa Bay is a good ballpark for pitchers. The Yankees are a really young lineup. I don't think they were really a strikeout heavy team last year, but it's kind of seems like it might be a completely different team with a lot of young bats. And I think that might be a good spot to go. Also Carlos Martinez. The Cubs are the world champs and they're great, blah, blah, blah. But he also has, some upside to it at cheaper prices.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. And a lot of people may not realize just because a team is good, and the Cubs are good. I'm not taking anything away from the Cubs, but just because they're good doesn't mean they don't strike out. And the Cubs actually they struck out a fair amount last year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, not only that, I mean, anything could happen. They might score 1 run or 2 runs, and I would have to look back and see, how Carlos Martinez pitched against them last year, because I'm sure he pitched against them a couple times, because they're in the same division.
Absolutely.
And I think St. Louis, if I remember right, is a pretty good park for pitching also.
Right. Yeah, for the most part, right. The only time that I think that it wouldn't be is when the weather's too hot, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. We're still pretty early in the spring here.
Yeah, so then other things that might stand out right away is, John Lester's great, but he's really bad at holding on runners. So maybe we can find some speed on St. Louis. I haven't really even looked at their team this year if they have any speed guys that can take advantage of that.
That's a great point. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I think we have to kind of let the listeners know. It's not just about it's like in basketball, right? Like, you don't just look for guys that can score points, right? You're looking for guys that can get rebounds, guys that can get steals, guys that can get assists. So it's the same philosophy in baseball. You don't just want a guy who can get hits or a guy that can. You're looking for steal upside, and you have to. There's so many different factors you can look for. I think this is a great point, man.
Well, in GPPs, I mean, all you're looking for is upside. You're looking for guys that have big upside for their price.
Right.
You don't really want Dustin Pedroia types for GPPs.
Right.
For cash games maybe, because, a lot of times he's going to get you a double, a single, and a run, and he's going to get you 10 points. But he's usually, 42 to 4,400. And usually you might be able to look down to a guy like Starling Castro, who, is obviously nowhere near the player Dustin Pedroia is, but he has more upside for the price because he might, he is more likely to get you 2 home runs than Pedroia is.
Yeah. I think, again, I get the logic here, and I definitely think you're onto something. And for those of you who maybe didn't read the book, I forgot what it's called. Did you get a chance to read that book they recently came out with about the whole DFS industry? I'm not sure, but
the Dueling with Kings book.
Yes, that's the one. I listened to the.
It's pretty good.
I listened to the audiobook. It's definitely good. I would definitely recommend it. And one of the interesting things is obviously Beep I'm a Jeep. He just won the NHL Live Final. And
right.
So we know he's a proven player, and they talked about him in the book, and they mentioned that he was one of the first people to really implement the whole stacking thing. And I think in baseball, I think people underestimate the value. Like, for instance, like what you said, there are certain situations where I can see a one-off. If you really like a hitter against a certain pitcher and the ballpark's not great, maybe you do a one-off, right? Because, I'm not going to trust that this whole team is going to do well in that park, but I can trust that this one guy is.
I mean, listen, here's the thing for GPPs. If it's a slate above 7 or 8 games and you're in a big person GPP, you have to stack. You just have to. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. If you look 9 out of 10 days, the winning team's going to be at minimum a 4-player stack.
Right.
And when I started, you could stack up to 6 people, and then they limited it to 5, and you'd always see 6 people winning, and then 5 stacks winning. And then last year, I started seeing a little bit of a trend where you'd see 4 stacks winning. But also on the other side, they had another 4 stack from another team. So you're just trying to get as much correlation as you can. As probably almost all your listeners know about the NFL correlation, quarterback and wide receiver. If Matt Ryan throws a touchdown to Julio Jones, everyone gets double points.
Right.
And it's that way in baseball. If Yuniel Escobar walks and then Cole Calhoun gets a hit, and then Mike Trout walks, and then Albert Pujols comes up and hits a grand slam, everyone is getting points and they all multiply. Yeah. And so if you're trying to pick one off, it's too hard.
Right. No, absolutely. You want to maximize your upside. You want to maximize it. If like I said, if we're looking at the Mets, if Curtis Granderson gets a walk, if Jose Reyes gets a walk, and then they do a double steal, you're getting more points. And then all of a sudden Cespedes hits a home run. You just maximize your upside, right? So it's like, and it's more so even in basketball. A lot of people like to do it thinking like point guards and a particular player because you got the assist potential. But I think in basketball it's kind of the least. Like in basketball you can get away with doing one-offs, but I think you're absolutely right. In baseball, you're pretty much, especially in these big tournaments, they're all top heavy. If you want to win money, you have to be at the top. You have to maximize your ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to get a 30 percentile score. I mean, we either want to be in the top 1% or we might as well finish last. I mean,
Sure.
who cares?
No,
You know?
you're right.
Yeah, we're trying to get that trophy on our name.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, real quick, I'm looking at the centers right now. I mean, I'm centers. I see the C. I'm still in basketball mode, my man. I'm looking at the catchers right now, and immediately at the very top, Gary Sanchez, Buster Posey. So again, we're not holding you to anything. I know you haven't done any kind of research for this, but your initial impression, you're looking at these two. On the one hand, Gary Sanchez kind of lit up the MLB world last year. On the other hand, Buster Posey has a matchup against a righty in a hitter's ballpark. In your opinion, just off first impression, which one of these guys do you think is going to be chalkier?
I mean, I assume it's going to be Buster Posey. I mean, I assume, the sharp people, the smart people are going to be thinking along the same lines as I am, But, Gary was the GOAT last year and everybody loved him, so I could be wrong.
It's tough, right? Like, that's the whole reason I wanted to bring it up because, like, yeah, we make it sound almost easy, right? Like, look at it, figure out who's going to be the chalk and avoid them. But sometimes it's not so easy to figure out who the chalk's going to be. It's like Buster Posey's in a better spot. Technically, on paper, he's going up against a righty. He's a left-handed hitter. He's in a hitter's ballpark. But then you got Gary. But at the same time, it's still Greinke. You never know. He can come out and show some flashes of old Greinke. Then on the other side, you got Gary Sanchez, who's been red hot. And he's going up against a Tampa team. He's going up against Chris Archer, somebody who struggled heavily last year. So it's not always easy. Yes. And it's not always easy. So I think that was a fair point.
I mean, you don't have to be contrarian at every single spot in your lineup. You know what I mean? So, I mean, opening day, it's going to be the hardest day, obviously, to measure ownership and where people are going to be at. And when you're playing every day, you're going to kind of get a feel for who everybody likes. And, over time, it's going to become easier to figure that stuff out. But,
great point.
I mean, opening day, I'm just trying to get in, whatever I think is best and just go from there. And then as time goes on, I'll kind of adjust.
I think that's a great point. Definitely that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally. Now, let me ask you a question. Is there a particular position that maybe you feel more comfortable punting on a regular basis? Now, obviously, it's going to be different night to night. But if let's say we forget this slate. Let's say we have like a 10-game slate, and we've got all these. Obviously, outfielders are typically more expensive. A lot of home run hitters in the outfield. Is there a particular position or two that you feel comfortable punting? Like in basketball, we kind of look to shooting guard a lot of times, a small forward to punt. So. What do you think?
I mean, it really just depends on the slate, but I want to make sure that everyone on my team has the upside to have a multi-home run game. So, most of the time, the positions that you can punt at and still find that are first base and outfield. At first base, some nights you're going to get a guy like, Albert Pujols, cheap, real cheap, or CJ Cron, another Angel guy, you're going to get him cheap, and they have – 2 home run upside in a good matchup, or, an outfield. I remember days last year where Justin Upton was really cheap, and he has big power, big upside. But, it just depends. I mean, there'll be some days where, a guy like Danny Espinosa is in a really good spot, and, he's a 220 hitter and he strikes out a pile, but he has big power. He had over 20 home runs last year, and you might be able to get him at 28 or 2,900 one day and make that work. So it is really slate dependent.
I got you.
And you'll look and you'll say, opportunity cost, is there guys that I'm fading at the top that I just can't fade? They're too good of a spot.
Oh, no. Again, it makes perfect logic. Is there anything else you wanted to say to anybody pertaining to baseball before we get out of here?
Well, I would say, as far as, which positions can you punt at real quick, because I'm just going to go back to this. A lot of times your stacks will kind of take you there, so let's say, you don't like second base and the team you're stacking has an okay second baseman. Maybe that's a spot where you just want to, put him in a little bit more.
I feel that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So anyways,
you kind of work from the top down, right? Like you get all the key players you want in there and then kind of see who you're left with, right?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of times I'll do double stacks, so you do 5 from one team and you say, okay, I have shortstop, catcher, and outfield left. There's another team that I really like, and all 3 of those positions are guys that I like. So it might be, 5 stack, and now you're the Dodgers. The Dodgers are another team you like, so you go Grandal, Corey Seager, and Adrian Zales against a weak righty. So you kind of, you get double correlation there.
That's awesome. That's awesome stuff. Listen, Matt, we're definitely gonna have you on many, many more of these baseball podcasts, man. It was a pleasure talking to you. And again, everybody, Matt recently joined with me and even with Fuego. We all joined up with Daily Roto Sharks, our sponsors, and we're all gonna be writing some articles. You're definitely gonna want to see what Matt puts out on his articles. I mean, obviously, you have the, if you're a subscriber of the pod, then you'll know when he's on. But listen, on a regular basis, he's going to be writing these articles. You're going to want to get on there and try to tap into the mind. This guy's won over 5 figures last year and only playing tournaments. And for those of you who've tried and been unsuccessful, you know how hard that is, especially in a sport like baseball with the amount of variance that there is and the amount of top players that we have. So, Matt, we really, really appreciate it, man. Anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I appreciate being on the pod. It was a lot of fun. I'm sorry to the audience. I'm a little nervous first time out. I'll get.
Hey man, you're doing great, man.
Yeah, I'll get better as we go along. But my thoughts were kind of jumbled. I had a lot more to say, but it just, it doesn't come out right all the time. But
we can't give away all the goods on your first pod, man. We can't give away all the goods, right?
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Hey, Matt, listen, good luck to your Oregon Ducks, man. I'll be watching the game. I'm a big Oregon. I didn't go to Oregon, obviously, but I love their uniforms, dude. I can't help. I love their uniforms. They got the sickest uniforms. So I've been rooting for Oregon for the last, mainly in football, in the Mariota days. I was a big fan of Oregon. Right. I'll be rooting for you, man, definitely.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
All right, those of you watching this video, please hit that like button. We really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and also subscribe to the WiseTake channel. If you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe. Give us some reviews. We need to get bumped up those rankings a little bit, and that's only going to happen when you guys give us some positive reviews. So we're dependent on you guys for that. Also, one last time, shout out to our sponsors at dailyrotosharks.com. Listen, man, if you've been on Twitter, I want you to do a hashtag. What is it? Hashtag Sheet Squad, and I want you to look at some of the success stories they've had. Go to their website. They have success stories right there. You can look and see all the different people, all the average Joes just like us who went on there and won tons of money thanks to their cheat sheets. Benjamin, you can find him on Twitter at xbenjaminx, and he's always open to answer any questions and to kind of get his audience. And if you follow at Daily Roto Sharks, that's actually ran by my man CG over there. Him and Ben are partners running the Daily Roto Sharks. So we're super happy for the sponsorship. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff with them, including live shows and all that stuff. And you're going to see plenty of Ben, plenty of CG, plenty of myself, plenty of Matt, plenty of Fuego, and plenty of other people that maybe you haven't got a chance to get to know that's part of the Daily Roto Sharks team. With that said, we briefly touched on the slate. This really wasn't a slate breakdown. This is just an overall MLB DFS season preview and really an introduction to Matt. I want you guys to understand, and I want you to see the value in Matt here because between the podcast and his write-ups over at DRS, you're going to want to hear. We're excited, and we're thinking we can all make some decent money here in the MLB DFS season. So that's going to do it for us. We got one more basketball pod, and then that's it. Next week we are MLB full-time. Hope you guys enjoyed the layout. That's it. And as always, good luck.